Today's question is, what's the most legendary work meltdown you've seen?
But before we begin, it would help us a lot if you subscribed, since 97.5% of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. So without further ado, let's start. I worked in IT, and one guy, who was one of the most chilled guys I knew, was responsible for the deployment, updates, and maintenance of a specific product that generated high revenue. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk and just heard a big crash and saw one of his 3 monitors on the floor. He stood up, shoved the next monitor over the divider onto the next section's desk, then swiped the 3rd monitor off the other side, picked up his keyboard and smashed it as hard as he could, kicked his chair away and slowly and calmly walked out the department without saying a word. He came back to work the next day as if nothing happened. Everyone knew the pressure he was under and was very good at his job, so nobody said a thing. Best I've seen was my 7th grade math teacher. There was a girl who always talked in class. She got moved to the front at some point, and she was laughing and giggling as always. After being told to be quiet about 8 times, the teacher is standing front and center in front of her, back to her, and writing an example on the board. Girl has one of those plastic pencil boxes all the girls used to decorate sitting on the front corner of her desk. The teacher just cracked. In one smooth motion, he spins around, yells "shut up," and smacks the box as hard as he can, and it goes flying 15 feet across the room, smashes into the wall. Pencils. Freaking. Everywhere. He swiftly walks to the door, slams it shut, and we could hear pounding on the wall. One brave kid peeks out the window. Dude was banging his head against the wall. About 2 minutes later, he walks back in. Crickets. Not a noise in the classroom. He begins walking around, picking up every single pen and pencil, puts them all in the box, places it gently on her desk, and then just continues the example like nothing ever happened. It was exquisite. In high school, I worked at a grocery store, and this kid was all pissed off at another bagger and swearing in front of the customers. He said he was hoping he'd get fired. I told him he should quit before he gets fired, so that it would look better on his resume in the future. A few minutes later, I realized he was missing. Then suddenly he comes around the corner from the manager's office, no longer in uniform. He threw his uniform in the trash in front of the manager. Then he looked at me and said loudly, "I took your advice," then proceeded to walk across the front end, point to each associate saying, "Fuck you," to each of them, and walked out. Everyone was staring at me after, and I said, "I did not tell him to do that." I will try to write this. Knowing your child has something wrong with them before they are born. Being told your wife should have an abortion. When your child is born, they are flown by helicopter to San Francisco Children's Hospital. Watching your newborn have multiple surgeries. Driving 4 hours each weekend to see your wife who is living in a Ronald McDonald house. They help tons. Watching your child prosper for a couple of months only to go back downward. Being told there is nothing more to do, and you only have a month or so left. Taking your child home knowing there is nothing you can do but still hoping. Flying across the country to seek other solutions but being told no. Feeling guilty that you should be doing more and not knowing what to do. Having hospice come to drug your child so they are not in pain. Holding your son of 6 months and watching him take his last breath. Having to call the mortuary and watching them take him away. Not knowing what to do now. Feeling helpless. It has been 14 years, and I think about what he would be like today. He was a trooper and stronger than I will ever be. It was good to get this out a bit. I used to work in a kitchen in an old folks' home. I had a manager named Edward who was a know-it-all piece of uninformed shit. I had a coworker named E who had a very serious medical condition and required a certain medication at certain points of the day. Edward didn't like E or the fact that she needed to keep her medication on her person. One day E forgot her medication and begged to run home and retrieve it. Edward smugly denied her and told her to finish work. So she tried and ended up briefly collapsing. She was okay but very weak and disoriented. Edward grabbed her by her arm, escorted her to her car, handed her the keys, and told her to leave. Then he left to go tell anyone that would listen that he was on drugs and he smelled booze on her. He was in the parking lot and called her mom to take her to the hospital. He was only 20 and very scared. He was discharged that night after some fluids and came back the next day upon hearing what Edward told everyone about her. She stormed into HR screaming for them to bring Edward's ass in the office immediately. As soon as he was called in, she whipped her name tag at him. I obviously lingered close by like a nosy bitch. She was screaming at the top of her lungs that Edward denied her to go home to get her medication. That was on file and HR was very aware of. And how fucking dare he accuse her of being a drug addict? And if he really believed she was under the influence of something, how stupid was he to put her in a car on the company's property, leaving them liable for her damages? At this point, much noise can be heard, as all three of them are screaming full force at one another. She threatened legal action and stormed out. Well, she did take legal action. For a ton of shit, including putting a clearly ill person behind the wheel. Not too long after this, I also quit. And a few months later, Edward was no longer employed by the kitchen, but rather was working as a deli boy in the local grocery store. I don't know what happened with ES lawsuit, but I hope that place and Edward got everything they deserved. Also, honorable mention to the maintenance man that threatened to shoot my old boss in the face for being such a dickless weasel. I worked in fast food for years, and while it might not be the most intense thing, this kid who worked 60+ hours a week at 17 came into work one day with a completely shaved head because it was more efficient to maintain, and it helped him work more often. I have never seen someone so young be so dead inside and with that shiny of a head. Edit. The guy is a lot happier now. He is doing well for himself and is climbing the upper ranks in the fast food business. Dude is loaded, has a GF, his own place, and a full head of hair. Edit 2 for those asking how he was loaded. The guy worked ridiculous hours while not paying rent or bills. Being 17 has some perks. For 2 years before he moved into his own place. He also didn't have much of a social life back then because of the crazy work grind, so the money just came rolling in. The guy is well on his way to becoming a franchise owner, and it's well deserved. Obviously, I don't know how much he had saved, but he got himself a high-end pre-built PC instead of building one because he couldn't be bothered to build it himself. Cost him almost $1,000 more, but he just shrugged his shoulders like, it's just $1,000. Which I doubt most 17-year-olds working minimum wage jobs can say. First, this involves the new 5-pound notes. For those who don't know, they're polymer notes, and if you fold them up, they tend to stay folded. It's important for the story. I served a customer, a friendly old man with white hair, who paid with a folded 5 pounds. I put it in the till. A few minutes later, my boss was in the till and saw the folded note. He decided that the folds meant it had been rolled up into a tube to snort coke with. He was absolutely adamant. I said, no, I just took that note from an old man. He started yelling, rolling the note up in his fingers to make a tube, shouting at me, look, it rolls up like this. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me I'm wrong. He kept shouting at me, basically waiting for me to apologize and back down, say I was wrong. But I wasn't, so I didn't. He wound up storming off, throwing things and slamming things. He's fucking insane, and I should have complained, but there would be no point. Everyone knows what he's like and no one cares. We had this girl at work, and she liked to wear pants that showed a significant portion of her ass. Like if her ass crack was the Gulf Coast of the USA with Key West being her asshole, we were probably at Tallahassee. Someone complained to her manager. He didn't believe us, so we had him sit in a meeting behind her and was completely horrified. So he had a conversation with her about proper workplace clothing. Well, she never got the message, and she got a phone call from HR giving a formal warning. She flips out, storms into a meeting, calls her boss a fucking pervert, then proceeds to yell, if you want to see my ass then see this, and moons the room, and storms off in a blaze of glory. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.